morning sun cast long shadows across the steps of Westfield Academy of Music, as May stood frozen at the entrance, her worn backpack clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. She had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, watching students in pressed uniforms flow past her with easy confidence. Each one seemed to belong in a way she feared she never would. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, repeating the words her mother had told her that morning, as she'd straightened May's second-hand uniform blazer. "This is your chance." Taking a deep breath, May finally pushed through the heavy wooden doors into a world that felt as foreign as another planet. The hallway stretched before her, all polished marble and oak panels lined with glass cases displaying trophies that gleamed under soft lighting. Photos of famous musicians who had once walked these same halls stared down at her, their expressions seeming to ask what she thought she was doing here. A scholarship kid from the East Side didn't just walk into Westfield Academy. Yet here she was, clutching her acceptance letter that had arrived 3 months ago, setting off tears and celebrations in her small apartment. Her mother had worked double shifts at the hospital cleaning rooms for years to pay for May's piano lessons with Mrs. Patel from their apartment building, who charged next to nothing because she saw something special in May's playing. "You need to check in at the office," a voice said, startling her from her thoughts. May turned to see a tall boy with kind eyes looking at her with a mixture of amusement and understanding. His blazer looked as new as everyone else's, but there was something in the way he carried himself that made May think maybe he understood what it felt like to be an outsider. "Thanks," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. "I'm a bit lost. First day?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm Raj, second year here. The office is down that hallway, first door on the right. Good luck." Before she could thank him properly, he was gone, swallowed by the stream of students heading to their morning classes. May followed his directions, trying to ignore the curious glances that followed her. Her shoes, practical and slightly scuffed, clicked too loudly on the marble floor. Everything about her screamed that she didn't belong. The woman at the office desk handed her a schedule without really looking up. "You're late for orientation. Room 103. By the time May found room 103, the orientation was nearly over. She slipped in through the back door, hoping to remain unnoticed, but 30 heads turned in unison to stare at her. Heat rushed to her face as she quickly took the only empty seat in the back row. "As I was saying," the elegant woman at the front continued, "Westfield has produced 6 Grammy winners, 12 principal players in major symphonies, and countless successful performers over our 80-year history. We expect excellence because we cultivate excellence." The woman's eyes landed on May, her gaze sharp and assessing. "For those who are awarded scholarships, remember that your place here is contingent on maintaining exceptional academic and musical standards. We do not offer second chances." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of new faces and information. May struggled to remember the labyrinth of hallways, the strict schedule, the unspoken rules that everyone else seemed to know instinctively. By lunchtime, her head was spinning and her stomach was in knots. The dining hall was another shock, more like a restaurant than any school cafeteria she had ever seen. Students sat in groups at tables covered with actual tablecloths, talking animatedly about summer master classes in Vienna and private lessons with world-renowned musicians. May found an empty table in the corner and unwrapped the lunch. Her mother had packed simple rice and vegetables that suddenly seemed embarrassingly plain. She ate quickly, trying to be invisible, listening to the conversations around her. "Did you hear about the new scholarship program? My father was against it, says it lowers the school's standards." "Well, they need the publicity. Westfield Academy opening doors for the underprivileged makes for good press." May kept her head down, pretending not to hear, pretending the words didn't sting. When she finished eating, she couldn't bear to sit in the dining hall any longer. She slipped out, looking for somewhere quiet to hide until afternoon classes began. Wandering down an empty corridor, she found herself in front of a set of double doors left slightly ajar. Peering inside, she saw a magnificent recital hall with rows of velvet seats facing a stage where a grand piano stood in solitary splendor. The room was empty, the lights dimmed. Almost without thinking, May pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The quiet was immediate and complete, wrapping around her like a blanket. Her footsteps were muffled by thick carpet as she walked slowly down the center aisle toward the stage. The piano drew her forward like a magnet. It was bigger than any she had ever played, a full concert grand, its black surface gleaming like still water. Back home, she practiced on an old upright piano at the community center, and before that, a keyboard her mother had bought secondhand when May was 7. May climbed the steps to the stage and approached the piano with reverence. She ran her fingers lightly over the fallboard, feeling the cool, smooth wood beneath her fingertips. This instrument probably cost more than her mother made in 5 years. Glancing around to make sure she was still alone, May carefully lifted the fallboard to reveal the keys. Perfect ivory and ebony, not a chip or scratch in sight. She sat down on the bench and positioned her hands above the keys, not quite touching them, feeling almost unworthy. "What are you doing?" The sharp voice cut through the silence like a knife. May jumped up from the bench, her heart pounding as she turned to see a group of students standing at the edge of the stage. At the front stood a girl with perfect blonde hair and an expression of pure disdain. Behind her were 4 others, all wearing the same look of amused contempt. "I asked you a question," the blonde girl said, taking a step forward. "What do you think you're doing with that piano?" "I was just looking," May said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "Just looking?" The girl raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "That's a Steinway concert grand worth more than your entire education here. Are your hands even clean?" The others laughed, and May felt her face burning with humiliation. "I'm Lily Vandermeer," the blonde girl continued, as if her name should mean something. "My family donated that piano." "And you are?" "Mei Zhang," she answered, wishing she could disappear. "Ah, one of the new scholarship cases." "I thought so." Lily turned to her friends with a smirk. "Did you know they're letting in students from public schools now? Apparently they can play a few notes and suddenly they deserve to be at Westfield." More laughter. May stood frozen, her hands clenched at her sides. "Let's see what you can do then," one of the boys challenged. "Play something." "Yeah, show us why they let you in," another added. I don't," May stammered, looking desperately toward the exit. "Oh, come on. You were so eager to touch the piano. Play something. Unless you can't." Lily's voice dripped with mock sweetness. May took a step back, bumping against the piano bench. She knew she should just walk away, but her feet wouldn't move. "As I thought," Lily said after a moment, "all these scholarship students think they deserve to be here. But when it comes down to it, they can't deliver." She turned to her friends. "Come on, we'll be late for theory." They left as suddenly as they had appeared, their laughter echoing in the empty hall. May stood alone on the stage, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She looked back at the piano, the instrument that had always been her solace and joy, now transformed into a symbol of everything that separated her from the world of Westfield Academy. The bell rang, signaling the start of afternoon classes. May hurried off the stage and out of the recital hall, promising herself that she would never set foot in that room again. As she rushed down the corridor trying to find her music theory classroom, she repeated her mother's words like a prayer. "You belong there just as much as anyone else. Never forget that." But on that first day at Westfield Academy, with the echo of mocking laughter still ringing in her ears, May didn't believe those words. Not yet. She had no idea that in just a few weeks, the very piano that had been the source of her humiliation would become the instrument of her triumph, or that the hands she'd been told were unworthy would create music that would leave even her harshest critics speechless. 2 weeks had passed since May's disastrous first day, and she had managed to make herself nearly invisible at Westfield Academy. She arrived early each morning and left late, keeping her head down in hallways and choosing seats in the back corner of every classroom. She spoke only when called on by teachers and ate lunch alone in the courtyard when weather permitted, or in empty practice rooms when it didn't. What she couldn't hide was her talent. In music theory, her hand shot up with answers that surprised even the strictest teachers. Her perfect pitch became obvious during ear training exercises, and her written compositions showed an understanding of harmony that went beyond textbook learning. Natural talent, she overheard one teacher tell another. Raw, unpolished, but undeniable. Still, May avoided touching any of the school's pianos. She had scheduled her required practice sessions for early mornings when no one else was around. Even then, she played only the required exercises, never letting herself get lost in the music the way she did at home on her keyboard, with its chipped keys and sometimes sticky pedals. It was Mr. Torres, her piano instructor, who finally confronted her after a particularly stiff performance of a Bach prelude. "Your technique is good," he said, sitting beside her on the bench after she'd finished. The clock showed 7:15 a.m., still 45 minutes before most students would arrive. "But you're playing like you're afraid of the piano." May stared at the keys, saying nothing. "Why don't you play something you love? Something that makes you want to play?" "I've done the assignment," she said quietly. "The Bach piece for next week's class." Mr. Torres sighed and closed the fallboard gently. May I ask you something? Why did you apply to Westfield?" The question caught her off guard. Because it's the best music school in the state. And why do you want to study music?" This time May looked up, confused by the obvious question. "Because when I really play, I feel like myself. Like I'm saying things I can't put into words." "That's what I thought." Mr. Torres smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "But I haven't seen that person yet. I've seen a very talented student who plays all the right notes at all the right times. But I haven't seen you play." Heat rose to May's face. She thought of her mother working double shifts to pay for those early lessons, of the hours she'd spent on that second-hand keyboard, of the joy music had always brought her, and she thought of Lily Vandermeer's mocking voice. "Are your hands even clean?" "There's a reason I got the scholarship," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I know there is," Mr. Torres replied. "That's why I'm asking you to stop hiding." He stood up and walked to the door. "The fall showcase is in 3 weeks. Each first-year student is expected to perform. Start thinking about what piece speaks for you." After he left, May sat motionless on the bench. The fall showcase was a major event. Parents, faculty, and even local music critics would attend. More importantly, it would be the first time most of her classmates would hear her play. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. She opened the fallboard again and placed her fingers on the keys, playing a few soft chords of a Chopin nocturne her grandmother had taught her years ago, before she passed away. The familiar notes comforted her, wrapping around her like her grandmother's warm hugs. "That's pretty." May whirled around to see Raj standing in the doorway. He held up his hands apologetically. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I have an early practice session too." He gestured to the violin case slung over his shoulder. "Was that Chopin?" May nodded, closing the fallboard quickly. "Don't stop on my account," he said, stepping into the room. "I've been wondering when I'd finally hear you play. You're so quiet in all the classes, but Mr. Torres keeps hinting that you're some kind of prodigy." "I'm not a prodigy," May protested. "I just practice a lot." Raj laughed. "That's what all the real talents say." He set down his violin case and leaned against the wall. "So what are you playing for the showcase?" "I don't know yet." May gathered her sheet music, uncomfortable with the attention. "Well, whatever it is, I bet it'll be good." He opened his violin case and began to tune the instrument. "Don't let people like Lily get to you, by the way. She treats everyone who isn't in her circle like they're beneath her." May paused. "You saw what happened?" "In the recital hall?" "Yeah, I was getting some sheet music from the back room." Raj tightened his bow. "Lily's father is on the school board, and her mother is some famous pianist. They think that entitles them to treat people however they want." "It kind of does, doesn't it?" May said bitterly. "No one stops them, only because no one challenges them." Raj played a few experimental notes on his violin. "Anyway, don't hide your playing because of them. That's letting them win." His words stayed with May throughout the day, through music history and ear training, through lunch, still eaten alone, and composition class. By afternoon, when she had her second piano session with Mr. Torres, she'd made up her mind. "I want to play the Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major for the showcase," she told him. Mr. Torres raised an eyebrow. "That's a challenging piece emotionally. Not technically difficult for someone with your skills, but it requires maturity of interpretation." "It was the first real piece my grandmother taught me," May explained. "She played it for me when I was sad or scared. After she died, I played it to remember her." Something softened in Mr. Torres's expression. "Then it's the perfect choice. Let's hear what you've got." For the first time since arriving at Westfield, May played with her whole heart. Her fingers moved across the keys with the familiarity of long practice, but also with the freedom that came from playing music that lived in her bones. When she finished, she looked up to see Mr. Torres watching her with an odd expression. "That," he said quietly, "is who I've been waiting to meet." The next 2 weeks were filled with intense practice. Mr. Torres worked with her on subtle dynamics and phrasing, helping her refine her already heartfelt interpretation. May practiced early in the mornings and late into evenings, and for the first time, She stopped caring if other students heard her. Occasionally, she noticed small groups lingering outside her practice room, listening. Once she caught a glimpse of Lily and her friends, their faces unreadable as they walked away. 3 days before the showcase, Mr. Torres had her perform the piece for the piano faculty. May played with her eyes closed, letting the music take her back to her grandmother's small living room, where the smell of jasmine tea and the sound of gentle encouragement had surrounded her. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the teachers began to discuss her performance. May didn't hear most of what they said. Her heart was pounding too loudly in her ears. But she caught phrases like emotional maturity and natural musicality. Ms. Zhang, the head of the piano department, said finally, "We'd like to move your performance to the end of the showcase." May blinked, confused. "The end?" "The closing spot," Mr. Torres explained, his eyes twinkling. "It's usually reserved for the student we expect to make the strongest impression." The implications hit her slowly. But that's usually a third or fourth year student." "Usually," agreed the department head, "but we believe your performance will provide a fitting conclusion to the evening." Word spread quickly about the unusual honor given to a first-year scholarship student. By lunchtime the next day, May could feel the stares following her in the hallways, some curious, some supportive, some openly hostile. She was collecting her theory books from her locker when Lily appeared beside her, flanked by 2 friends. "So you've charmed the faculty," Lily said, her voice cool, impressive for someone who was too scared to play a note a month ago. May closed her locker and turned to face her. "I'm just playing my piece like everyone else." "In the closing spot," one of Lily's friends pointed out, "after only a few weeks here. Some of us have worked for years to earn that kind of recognition," Lily continued. "Years of proper training, proper competitions." May felt a flash of anger. "I've worked hard too." "Playing on what? Some old keyboard in a community center?" Lily's smile was sharp. "Don't get too comfortable in the spotlight, May. The showcase is a lot of pressure. Not everyone can handle performing for a real audience." They walked away, leaving May standing alone in the hallway, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if she froze under the pressure? What if her months of practice on an inferior instrument had left her unprepared for a real performance? That evening she called her mother. "They're just scared," her mother said after May explained what had happened. "You're challenging what they believe about themselves and people like us." "What if I mess up?" May whispered. "What if I prove them right?" Her mother's voice was firm. "Then you get back up and play again another day." "But May, listen to me. Your grandmother always said music doesn't come from your hands. It comes from your heart. And your heart is strong." The night of the showcase arrived with a flurry of activity. The recital hall, the same one where May had been mocked weeks earlier, was transformed with flowers and special lighting. Programs listed the performers and their selections, with May's name and the Chopin Nocturne printed at the very bottom of the page. Backstage, students in formal attire warmed up and nervously adjusted their clothes. May wore her only good dress, carefully pressed by her mother that morning. It wasn't as fancy as what the other girls wore, but its deep blue color made her feel strong. Through the stage curtain, she could see the audience filing in, parents, teachers, local musicians. She spotted her mother being shown to a seat, looking slightly out of place but proud in her best work clothes. One by one, the students performed. Some played with technical brilliance, others with careful precision. Lily's performance of a difficult listitude earned enthusiastic applause. As the evening progressed, May's hands grew cold with nerves. Mr. Torres found her just before her performance. "Remember why you chose this piece," he said simply. "Play for her." May nodded, understanding immediately. When her name was finally called, she walked onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding her. She sat at the gleaming piano, the same Steinway that had seemed so forbidden weeks ago, and placed her hands on the keys. The audience faded away. The judgmental stares, the pressure, even her own doubts disappeared. As she began to play the familiar opening notes of the nocturne, May closed her eyes and simply let the music flow through her fingers, a river of memory and emotion that carried her home. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major floated over the silent recital hall. May's fingers moved across the keys with a gentle touch as if caressing an old friend. The melody rose and fell like waves, each phrase flowing naturally into the next. This wasn't just playing notes on a page, this was storytelling through sound. In the front row, Mr. Torres leaned forward slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. Beside him, the other piano faculty watched with growing interest. This was not the same timid girl who had been hiding in practice rooms at dawn. This was a musician speaking her truth. May had forgotten about the audience entirely. She was playing for her grandmother now, remembering how the old woman's gnarled hands had once guided her own small fingers across piano keys. She was playing for her mother who had sacrificed so much, and in some way she was playing for herself, for the girl who had stood frozen with shame on this very stage weeks ago. As the piece progressed to its more emotional middle section, something remarkable happened. The audience, which had been politely attentive for previous performances, became utterly still. The usual small movements, program rustling, quiet coughing, subtle shifting in seats, all ceased. There was only the music and the girl creating it. In the third row, Lily sat with perfect posture, her expression unreadable. Next to her, her friends exchanged glances as May's playing intensified. This wasn't what they had expected. The technique was impressive, yes, but it was the emotional depth that caught them off guard. The scholarship girl wasn't just playing Chopin, she was revealing something profoundly personal through his notes. Halfway through the piece, May opened her eyes briefly and caught a glimpse of her mother in the audience. The woman's eyes shone with unshed tears, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The sight gave May a fresh surge of confidence. She leaned into the music, her body swaying slightly as the dynamics shifted from pianissimo to a rich, resonant forte and back again. There was a moment in the piece, a particular phrase where the melody seemed to hang suspended like a question left unanswered, that had always moved May deeply. As she approached it now, she took a small liberty with the tempo, stretching the moment just enough to let its beauty fully unfold. It was a choice her grandmother had taught her, a slight deviation from the strict notation that transformed good playing into something transcendent. In the faculty section, the head of the piano department raised an eyebrow, impressed by the musical intuition behind the choice. It was the kind of interpretation that couldn't be taught. You either felt music this way or you didn't. As May moved into the final section, returning to the gentle theme with new emotional weight, she felt something shift inside herself. The fear that had defined her first weeks at Westfield was dissolving with each note. This piano, this hall, this music, they belonged to her as much as to anyone else. Not because of her scholarship, not despite it, but because music itself recognized no boundaries of wealth or background. It asked only for honesty and dedication. The final chords resonated through the hall, lingering in the air like a held breath. Then silence, complete and profound. For 3 heartbeats no one moved. May's hands remained poised above the keys, the sound still echoing in her mind. Then she lowered them to her lap and raised her head. The applause began with a single pair of hands, Mr. Torres rising to his feet, and then erupted across the hall like a wave breaking shore. Row by row the audience stood, their faces alight with that special joy that comes from witnessing something authentic and beautiful. At the back of the hall, a music critic from the local paper was already scribbling notes, his eyebrows raised in pleasant surprise. May rose from the bench, somewhat dazed by the response. She bowed slightly, the way Mr. Torres had coached her, and then again as the applause continued. When she looked up, she caught sight of Raj near the side of the hall, grinning and giving her a thumbs up. Next to her mother, an elderly couple who had earlier watched Lily perform were nodding with approval. As she left the stage, May felt lightheaded with relief and lingering adrenaline. Backstage, other students waited with varied expressions, some genuinely impressed, some clearly surprised, and a few, including some of Lily's closest friends, tight-lipped and stiff. That was a boy with a cello case began, then shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. Yeah, another student agreed. Yeah. A small crowd gathered around May, asking questions about her musical background and training. Where had she studied before? How long had she been playing? Who were her teachers? Each question reminded her how different her path had been from theirs. Community center pianos instead of private instructors, YouTube tutorials alongside formal lessons when money was tight, hours of practice on an electric keyboard with broken keys. My grandmother taught me first, she explained. She played in Shanghai before coming here. Then I had lessons with Mrs. Patel in our apartment building until I was 12. And after that, a teacher at the community center. Mr. Torres is my first conservatory instructor. The students exchanged glances. Processing this unconventional musical education, May waited for the judgment, the dismissal of her background as inadequate or quaint. Instead, a tall girl who played flute asked, "Could you show me how you approached that middle section?" The way you shaped those phrases was really special. Before May could answer, the backstage door opened and the piano faculty entered, followed by the school director. Conversations hushed immediately. "Ms. Jiang," the director said, extending her hand. "A remarkable performance. Truly remarkable." "Thank you," May managed, still overwhelmed. "I wonder," the head of the piano department added, "if you would consider playing at the winter fundraiser next month. We like to showcase our most promising students for the donors." The backstage area went completely silent. The winter fundraiser was attended by the wealthiest supporters of the academy, as well as representatives from major music schools and orchestras. First-year students were never invited to perform. Yes, I would be honored," May said, her voice barely above a whisper. The faculty members smiled and moved on to speak with other students, leaving a wake of whispers behind them. May stood frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. "Looks like you've made quite an impression," a cool voice said from behind her. May turned to find Lily standing there, still in her performance attire, an elegant black dress that probably cost more than May's mother made in a month. But something was different about her expression. The usual contempt was missing, replaced by something more complex. "Your playing," Lily said carefully, "was not what I expected. It wasn't exactly praise, but coming from Lily, the acknowledgement felt significant." May nodded, unsure how to respond. "Where did you learn to interpret Chopin like that?" Lily asked, genuine curiosity breaking through her controlled demeanor. "My grandmother," May replied. "She always said that Chopin wrote what couldn't be spoken aloud, that we had to listen for the words between the notes." Something flickered in Lily's eyes, recognition perhaps, or a shared understanding. For a moment they were just two young musicians discussing a composer they both loved. Then Lily's friends appeared, breaking the moment. "Come on, Lily, your parents are waiting to take us for dinner." Lily hesitated, then gave May a small nod before walking away. It wasn't friendship, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of May as a fellow musician worthy of respect. As the backstage area gradually emptied, May finally made her way to the lobby where her mother waited, beaming with pride. They embraced tightly, neither needing words to express what they felt. "My little girl," her mother said finally, wiping away tears. "Your grandmother would have been so proud today." "I felt her with me," May admitted. "When I was playing, it was like she was guiding my hands." A distinguished-looking couple approached them, the elderly pair May had noticed sitting near her mother. "Excuse me," the woman said. "That was a beautiful performance. My husband and I sponsor a summer music program at the National Conservatory, and we'd love to discuss the possibility of your participation next year." As they exchanged information, May caught sight of Lily across the lobby, watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met briefly before Lily turned away, led by her parents toward the parking lot. Later that night, back in their small apartment, May sat with her mother at their tiny kitchen table, still processing everything that had happened. "Do you think things will be different now?" she asked, stirring her tea absently. Her mother considered the question carefully. "Some things will change. Doors will open. People who didn't see you before will suddenly want to know you." She reached across the table and took May's hand. "But the important things, why you play, what music means to you, those should stay the same." "I was so scared they would laugh at me," May confessed, "that I wouldn't belong no matter how well I played. And now?" May thought about Mr. Torres's proud smile, about the faculty's invitation, about the students who had gathered around her backstage with questions and congratulations. She even thought about Lily's reluctant acknowledgement. "I think," she said slowly, "that maybe I've been focusing on the wrong kind of belonging. Music is where I belong. Everything else is just details." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Your grandmother used to say that true musicians never play to be accepted. They play because the music demands to be heard." May nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle into her bones. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be students who looked down on her background, donors who saw her as a charity case, competitions where her unconventional training might be questioned. But none of that mattered as much as what she'd discovered tonight. When she played from her heart, the world stopped to listen. And in that sacred space between notes, no one cared about scholarships or designer clothes or family connections. There was only the music, honest and true. As she went to bed that night, May ran her fingers over the keys of her old keyboard in the darkness, silently practicing the piece she would play at the winter fundraiser. The plastic keys felt different from the Steinway's ivory, but the music they could produce was just as real, just as valid. For the first time since arriving at Westfield, she fell asleep without anxiety gnawing her stomach. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, she would face them the same way she had faced the showcase, one note at a time, with her grandmother's wisdom guiding her hands and her own courage carrying her forward. The weeks following the showcase brought changes May could never have imagined. Students who had never spoken to her now greeted her in hallways. Teachers who had barely noticed her presence now called on her regularly in class. Even the cafeteria staff seemed to smile a little more warmly when serving her lunch. "It's like I suddenly became visible," May told Raj as they walked to theory class together, a new routine that had developed naturally after the showcase. "That's what happens when you stop hiding," he replied, adjusting his violin case strap. "Though I bet some people wish you'd stayed invisible." He wasn't wrong. While many students had approached May with genuine admiration, Lily's closest friends maintained a chilly distance. They whispered when she entered rooms and fell silent when she sat nearby in classes. Lily herself was more complicated. Not friendly exactly, but no longer openly hostile. Sometimes May would catch her watching during practice sessions, her expression thoughtful rather than scornful. Mr. Torres had increased the difficulty of May's repertoire, challenging her with pieces that stretched her technical abilities. "Your musicality is extraordinary," he'd told her, "but now we need to build the technical foundation to match it." This meant longer hours in practice rooms, working through exercises that left her fingers aching. But May welcomed the challenge. Each new piece felt like a mountain to climb, difficult but exhilarating. The winter fundraiser loomed ahead, bringing both excitement and pressure. The piano department head had selected a Rachmaninoff prelude for her to perform, considerably more difficult than the Chopin, nocturne but well-suited, to showcase her emotional depth and growing technical skills. "Only 6 weeks to prepare," Mr. Torres reminded her during their lesson, 3 weeks after the showcase. "And this piece demands much more than the Chopin." "I know," May said, flexing her tired fingers. "I've been practicing every spare minute." "Too much, perhaps," he observed, noting the tension in her shoulders. "Remember, music needs space to breathe. So do musicians." But it was hard to ease up when so much felt at stake. The fundraiser would be attended by people who could shape her future. Donors who might offer scholarships for summer programs, representatives from prestigious music camps, even scouts from youth orchestras looking for promising soloists. For the first time in her life, doors were opening that May had only dreamed about. She was determined not to waste the opportunity. One afternoon, about a month after the showcase, May was working through a particularly challenging passage of the Rachmaninoff when she became aware of someone watching. She looked up, expecting to see Mr. Torres for their scheduled lesson, but instead found Lily standing in the doorway. "Don't stop," Lily said when May's hands froze over the keys. "That section needs work, but you're getting closer." Surprised by the almost compliment, May didn't know how to respond. Lily entered the room and set her bag on a chair. "Your left hand is too tense," she said, moving closer to the piano. "That's why you're missing those jumps." "I know," May admitted. "I can't seem to get the reach without tensing up." Lily hesitated, then sat on the bench beside May, leaving careful space between them. "May I show you something?" Too startled to refuse, May nodded. "My mother taught me this trick for Rachmaninoff," Lily said, demonstrating a subtle shift in hand position. "He had enormous hands, so normal people need adaptations. Try approaching from this angle instead." May copied the movement, finding to her surprise that the reach became more manageable. The next attempt at the passage went more smoothly. That's really helpful," she said, looking at Lily with new eyes. "Thank you." Lily shrugged but seemed pleased. "Rachmaninoff is my specialty. I've been playing his work since I was 10. Your technique is amazing, May said honestly. She had watched Lily play during class demonstrations and had been impressed despite herself by the girl's flawless execution. Something like a genuine smile flickered across Lily's face before she stood up, resuming her usual composed demeanor. The fundraiser is important. If you're going to represent the school, you should do it properly. Before May could respond, Mr. Torres appeared in the doorway. He raised an eyebrow at finding the two girls together but said nothing as Lily gathered her bag. Just showing Zhang a hand position for the Rachmaninoff, Lily explained, suddenly formal again. Good afternoon, Mr. Torres. After she left, Mr. Torres gave May a curious look. That was unexpected. Very, May agreed, still processing what had happened. I think she actually wanted to help. Music creates strange alliances, Mr. Torres said with a small smile. Now let's hear what you've prepared. The encounter with Lily marked a subtle shift in the Academy's social landscape. While they weren't exactly friends, a grudging mutual respect had developed. Occasionally, they even exchanged technical tips during practice sessions. Other students noticed, and gradually the invisible barrier between May and her classmates began to erode. 2 weeks before the fundraiser, disaster struck. May woke up with a scratchy throat that rapidly deteriorated into a full-blown flu. Her mother wanted to keep her home, but with the fundraiser approaching, May insisted on attending classes. You can't play if you're sick, her mother argued, feeling her forehead with a cool hand. Your health comes first. I'll just observe classes, May promised. No playing until I'm better. But within days, her condition worsened. The school nurse called her mother to pick her up after finding May nearly passed out in a practice room, still trying to work through her pieces despite a raging fever. For a week, May was confined to bed, drifting in and out of restless sleep. Each day lost to illness felt like a catastrophe. The Rachmaninoff required precision and strength, neither of which she could maintain without consistent practice. When she finally returned to school, pale and weakened, only 9 days remained before the fundraiser. Mr. Torres listened to her play through the piece once, then shook his head. The fever took more out of you than you realize, he said gently. Your stamina is compromised. I think we should consider an alternative piece. No, May said with unexpected firmness. I can do this. I just need to practice more. May. Mr. Torres leaned forward, his expression serious. There's no shame in adapting to circumstances. Great musicians know when to persist and when to pivot. Please, she begged. Give me 3 days. If I can't get it back by then, I'll switch to something easier. Reluctantly, Mr. Torres agreed. What followed were 3 of the most grueling days of May's young life. She arrived at school before dawn and left long after sunset, working through the Rachmaninoff in small sections, building back her endurance minute by minute. She skipped lunch to practice and stayed so late that the janitor had to remind her the building was closing. On the 3rd day, Mr. Torres found her asleep at the piano, her head resting on her arms, sheet music scattered around her. He gently woke her and asked to hear the piece. May played through the Rachmaninoff from memory. Her technique still not at its pre-illness level, but with a newfound depth that seemed to have emerged from her struggle. When she finished, she looked up anxiously. Well, Mr. Torres was quiet for a long moment. You've worked incredibly hard, he finally said. But I'm concerned about the physical toll. Your hands are trembling, it was true. Despite her determination, May's body was still recovering. The demanding piece left her exhausted in a way it hadn't before her illness. I can push through it, she insisted. The fundraiser is only 6 days away. Yes, and then what? You damage your hands? Make yourself sick again? Mr. Torres shook his head. Music is a lifelong journey, May. This is one performance of many to come. Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. Everyone's expecting me to play this piece now. The program's already been printed. If I change to something simpler, they'll think I couldn't handle it. Is that what matters most? Mr. Torres asked quietly. What people think? The question hung in the air between them. May thought back to her showcase performance, how she'd played from her heart without worrying about judgments. When had she started caring so much about others' expectations? I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice small. The door creaked open, and to their surprise, Lily stood there, holding sheet music. Sorry to interrupt, she said, looking uncomfortable. I was practicing next door and, well, I couldn't help overhearing. Mr. Torres sighed. It's all right, Ms. Vandermeer. We're just discussing some challenges with the fundraiser program. Lily stepped fully into the room, unusually hesitant. I have a suggestion if you're open to it. Both May and Mr. Torres looked at her with surprise. The Rachmaninoff is impressive, but there's another option that might showcase Zhang's strengths without requiring the same physical stamina. Lily placed her sheet music on the piano. Debussy's Clair de Lune, technically more accessible but still sophisticated enough for the fundraiser. And, she glanced at May, it has emotional depth that would suit your playing style. Mr. Torres picked up the music, considering. It's an excellent suggestion. One of the most beloved piano pieces, and still challenging in its own way, particularly the dynamics and phrasing. I know the piece, May said slowly. She'd learned it the previous year and had played it often at home. But isn't it too simple for the fundraiser? Simple? Lily raised an eyebrow. There's nothing simple about playing Debussy well. Anyone can hit the right notes, but making it speak? That's rare. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Besides, it's better to play something simpler beautifully than to struggle through something too difficult. That's what my mother always says. After she left, May and Mr. Torres looked at each other in amazement. Well, Mr. Torres said with a smile, it seems Ms. Vandermeer has hidden depths. Do you think she's right? May asked, looking at the Debussy score. Would it be okay to change the piece? Mr. Torres sat beside her on the bench. I think the question is, which piece can you play with your whole heart right now? That's the one that will move the audience regardless of its technical difficulty. May placed her hands on the keys and began to play the opening measures of Clair de Lune from memory. The gentle flowing notes filled the room, creating an atmosphere of moonlit tranquility. Even in this simple run-through, the music had a luminous quality that the Rachmaninoff, for all its brilliance, had lacked in her recent practices. When she finished the introduction, she looked at Mr. Torres. I think I need to let go of the Rachmaninoff. For now, he nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face. That, Mei Zhang, is the decision of a true musician. The night of the winter fundraiser arrived with a light snowfall that dusted Westfield Academy's campus like powdered sugar. Inside the grand hall, much larger than the recital hall where the showcase had been held, staff bustled about, arranging fresh flowers and adjusting lighting. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, illuminating the room where tables were set with fine china and silver for the dinner that would follow the performances. Backstage, May peeked through the curtains at the arriving guests. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant evening wear handed their coats to attendants before being escorted to their seats. She spotted the headmaster greeting a couple whose donation had funded the new practice rooms last year. Quite different from the showcase, isn't it? Raj appeared beside her, dressed in a borrowed suit that was slightly too big in the shoulders. May nodded, smoothing down her dress. A deep green velvet that her mother had found at a second-hand shop and altered to fit perfectly. It wasn't designer like the outfits worn by most other student performers, but it made May feel graceful and confident. I can't believe we're playing for these people, she whispered. That woman in the blue dress is a trustee at the National Conservatory. And the man talking to Mr. Torres was a conductor for the symphony orchestra, Raj added. No pressure or anything. They shared a nervous laugh before Raj was called for his sound check. May returned to the small warm-up room where she had been practicing, her mind going over every nuance of Clair de Lune. The piece had proven to be the perfect choice. In the 6 days since deciding to switch from the Rachmaninoff, May had reconnected with the gentle, flowing melody. Without the physical strain of the more technically demanding piece, she had been able to focus on expression, on making each phrase speak with clarity and emotion. Mr. Torres had worked with her daily, refining her interpretation. Remember, Debussy was painting with sound, he had told her. Let us see the moonlight in your playing. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. 10 minutes, called the stage manager. May took a deep breath and played through the opening measures one last time. Her hands felt steady, her mind clear. Whatever happened tonight, she would play with her whole heart. When she stepped into the wings to wait for her turn, she found Lily already there, resplendent in a tailored burgundy dress, her hair swept into an elegant updo. Nervous? Lily asked, watching as another student finished his cello piece on stage. A little, May admitted. You? Lily considered the question seriously. Not about the playing, but my parents have high expectations. They were surprised when I didn't get the closing spot. The comment hung between them. Not quite an accusation, but an acknowledgement of how their positions had shifted since the beginning of the year. "Your Mozart sonata is beautiful," May said sincerely. She had heard Lily practicing it all week. "The precision in the runs is incredible." "Thank you," Lily replied, sounding genuinely pleased. After a pause, she added, "The Debussy suits you better than the Rachmaninoff did." It was the right choice. Before May could respond, Lily's name was announced. With a small nod, she walked onto the stage, her posture perfect as she took her place at the piano. Lily's performance was flawless, technically brilliant, and beautifully executed. The Mozart sparkled under her fingers. Each note precisely placed, each phrase elegantly shaped. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, and May could see Lily's parents in the front row, nodding with approval. Two more students performed after Lily, a violinist and a flutist, before the announcer finally called May's name. As she walked onto the stage, the lights seemed brighter than she remembered, the audience larger and more imposing. She spotted her mother sitting near the back, wearing her best dress, her eyes already shining with pride. May settled at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands in her lap, taking a moment to center herself. In that brief silence, she remembered her grandmother's words. "Music is the space between the notes. That's where the feeling lives." She began to play, her touch gentle on the opening chords of Clair de Lune. The familiar melody emerged like moonlight, gradually illuminating a landscape. May didn't just play the notes, she created a world with them, a world of soft shadows and silver light, of quiet beauty and gentle melancholy. In the audience, conversations that had continued softly during other performances fell silent. The wealthy donors and music professionals leaned forward slightly, drawn into the atmosphere May was creating. Even the servers paused in their preparations at the back of the hall, momentarily captivated. As the piece built toward its climax, May's fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence. She wasn't thinking about technique now or about impressing anyone. She was simply allowing the music to flow through her as natural as breathing. Each dynamic shift, each crescendo and diminuendo felt organic and inevitable. When the final notes faded into silence, May kept her hands on the keys for a moment, reluctant to break the spell. Then she slowly lowered them to her lap and raised her head. The applause began immediately, warm, enthusiastic, and genuine. People rose to their feet, not out of politeness, but because the music had moved them to do so. Near the back, May's mother wiped tears from her eyes, while Mr. Torres, standing by the wall, nodded with quiet satisfaction. As May took her bow and left the stage, she felt a curious lightness, as if something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. This performance hadn't been about proving herself or earning approval. It had been about the music itself, pure, honest, and true. Backstage, other students congratulated her with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Raj gave her a quick hug before rushing off to prepare for his own performance. And to her surprise, Lily approached with an expression that might almost have been admiration. "That," Lily said quietly, "is how Debussy should sound." Coming from Lily, it was high praise indeed. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. After all the performances concluded, students joined the guests for dinner, each assigned to a table with potential donors and music professionals. May found herself seated with the National Conservatory trustee she had spotted earlier, as well as the director of a prestigious summer music program. "Your playing has a rare quality," the trustee told her over dessert. "Technical skills can be taught, but what you have, that emotional intelligence, is something special."